Hello, my name is Casey Sabella, and I currently serve as the senior pastor of Motion Church here in Waterbury, Connecticut. In November of 2017, I was invited by a mutual friend to speak at a conference in Zimbabwe, a country located near the southern tip of Africa. There, I met Jean Regis and Giselle Duga, missionaries who have served this impoverished country all of their adult lives. He pastors a church in Chiredzi, located 250 miles south of Harare, the nation's capital. 2 days after I arrived, the entire government, led by Robert Mugabe, collapsed after 37 years of mismanagement and corruption. The State Department texted me, warning me to remain inside, as the possibility of widespread violence was expected. Tanks and soldiers filled the streets of the capital, but in that chaos, I knew God sent me to Zimbabwe with a purpose. While there, I traveled to rural areas that had no electricity or plumbing to share the gospel. People would travel with their families for several miles in the dark of night to attend evangelistic services. We witnessed over 50 people who came to Christ, many of them teenagers. The challenges people face each day in Zimbabwe to survive is heart-wrenching. A critical need there, particularly in rural areas, is for fresh, clean water. Many die from cholera and other diseases brought on by drinking contaminated water. Women and their daughters walk up to 5 miles round trip to fill buckets of water to carry back to their families each morning. As a result, many girls never get the opportunity to go to school, and the cycle of poverty continues. I was invited back to Zimbabwe the next year and began to investigate the possibility of creating wells to address the pressing need. While there, the pastor and I visited Mupinga and witnessed something quite extraordinary. A Norwegian charity created a unique solar-powered well system that provides fresh water for drinking, washing, additional water for livestock, and the ability to irrigate adjacent farmland. Each family in Mupinga is given a single 400-foot row as members of the community. They grow cabbage, kale, carrots, onions, and a whole host of vegetables. Because of the weather conditions, they can harvest crops 4 times each year in the fertile soil of Zimbabwe. Many have enough left over to sell in the marketplace and create additional income for their families. Upon seeing this, the pastor and I caught the vision of what wells for Zimbabwe might become. Instead of a single well providing needed fresh water to a community, we envisioned well systems in many places that offered nutritious food and economic opportunities for each family. The well system in Mupinga took many years to build and required the cooperation of several nonprofit agencies. We learned they had no plans to develop more systems in Zimbabwe. Pastor Duga and I conceived of privately funding this kind of system in 6 rural areas of Zimbabwe, managed entirely by local churches instead of foreign governments. We drove approximately 300 miles, visiting potential church sites. Each pastor willingly donated church property for future farms to be irrigated by future wells. We contacted the original architect of the water system in Mupinga and learned that the entire operation, including a machine-dug well, solar power, above-ground tank, below-ground pump, and all the accessories costs $9,000 to $12,000 each, depending on how deep the well hole must be dug. Due to the generosity of several people back home, we began digging the first well in Zimbabwe. Listen to this eyewitness account of when the first well hit water.
Hello everyone, my name is Henry Madakadze. I'm a volunteer with Wells for Zimbabwe. I just want to share with you a little bit of what happened when we went to drill a bore in Zimbabwe. We started drilling around 5 p.m. It was almost getting dark. and everyone from all walks of life from that village had come to see this miracle that was happening, because they had never seen something like this before. What happened is they started drilling from 5 p.m. and when we hit about 40 meters, people were now being skeptical. Some went back home because they thought they were never going to find water. But when we hit 52 meters, wow, a miracle happened. Water just came gushing out, and there was ululating, people were whistling, people were jumping up and down, shaking hands, celebrating, because we had hit safe water for the community. I even had a chance to witness a certain woman crying. She had tears on her face because she was saying they were used to walking kilometers and kilometers to fetch water. Now they had fresh water right by their doorstep. You know, it is so fulfilling to see people happy, to see people have fresh water in their backside. This is something that is really big for the community, and we want to appreciate it. Thank you.
During my third visit in 2019, I was able to see the progress of our first well system. People greeted us with dancing, and several area officials came to see the project. At that time, Pastor Regis shared the gospel, and many came to Christ in the open field, including 2 government officials. Before I left Zimbabwe, I met with Craig Dial, who has an extraordinary ministry in Harare called Foundations for Farming. 30 years ago, he and his partner were driven from their farms by the government of Robert Mugabe. Many farmers died in the conflict, but Craig and his partner decided to forgive instead of fight back. Since that time, they've given their lives to helping Zimbabweans learn to farm without any tools other than string and a tape measure. Their crops yield 16 times more than land that is plowed by machines. We formed a partnership before I left, and several weeks later, they sent a team to our new well system, training the locals how to farm the land next to the well. They also labored together to put up the water tank and complete the first well system. This has now become the center of town for that farming community. Wells for Zimbabwe is a non-profit organization funded entirely by the gifts and compassion of fellow Christians in other parts of the world. Would you pray what God might ask you to do to help these people on the other side of the world? Thank you.